My name's Day 9. How are you? It's time for episode 702, part 2. Part 2. We've got a chance to see a very interesting game 1 between Oz and Hyun, and a less than interesting game 2 between them, but we still really loved Oz builds. And this next game is also relatively not noteworthy, a fairly straightforward game, so we'll just talk about it through so that way we can get on to the very juicy game number 4. Hyun again goes for a very cut all the corners build, but for a different reason. On this map, it's just so hard to do anything with this thin-ass ramp. So he goes pylon, gateway. Hyun goes for hatchery with a drone scout into a third hatchery. So again, this fast gateway needs to have a justification. We can't just go fast gateway and then get the forge and be normal. We want to get a very fast cybernetics core to match along with this. And in this game, oh my god, it's so fast. Now for comparison, this is 346. Typically, a gateway starts at 330. So this is very early. Very, very, very nicely early. Normally, Cybernetics Core begins at 4:30-ish. So as Oz begins to extend his way out here, just scouting around, he's going to be very happy to see this hatch. No pressure for the time being. With these kinds of timings that we're seeing out of Oz, I mean, one thing that's nice is that he does get this very swift warp gate research, but I like fast Stargate a lot, especially as a tool to get up a very fast third. The thing that does sometimes get in the way is that you are a little bit low on minerals. By increasing the pace of the gateway in the cybernetics core, you increase the rate at which you are able to spend money. So we see Oz do kind of what might look like an unusual move, going for a stalker first. Here's the really sweet advanced stuff that we see out of Oz. He goes for Stalker because in the now he needs to deal with the Zerglings that, as our minimap is going insane and wants to let us know, there's Zerglings coming, so he needs anything to block the front. But why the Stalker? Well, when the Sentry comes out, it will block the front, and then the Stalker can go park itself at the back sides and prevent any scouting of this Stargate. We've seen SOS do this a lot, go for a very fast Stalker, and then block things. Oz has to rush for the Stalker at his front. We even saw one Chrono Boost go down this gateway. Oz had to perform that rush because, again, he has no forge, he has no cannons. Come on, Oz. And scoot out of the way. Ooh. And then here's Oz getting to just calmly chill and build Phoenixes at a very, very, very early time in the game. Nice. Extra geysers going down. A pretty typical time for the geysers to go around. 6:30. And then suddenly Oz explodes into action, trying to kill off all that he can. Hyun, in the meantime, is just going double gas at the backside, going for a layer. And there's this weird question of where should you build gases? The general rule is build your geysers in the most scoutable locations first. Building geysers here is very useful because if a Zerg scouts this, he has no idea how many geysers you have. If he scouts these two and sees them, you could have just these two, or you could have 4, or you could have 6. If he scouts you and sees nothing here, then he knows you have either 2 or 4. So similarly, it's very easy to get Phoenixes or a hallucinated scout in the back here. So Hyun builds the extractors here. Normally an order would be like these two, then these two, and then finally the 2 in the main. Nice little tips and tricks. Alright, Roach Warren going down. Nice basic early defense. If you're in Hyun's shoes, you're going to be thinking, God, that's actually very early. A lot of Zerg players begin building Spore Crawlers at 8 minutes, so the fact that there's already 3 Phoenixes here makes for quite the notable surprise. Just darts in, just getting some scouting done. And per usual, I love the follow-ups from both players. Oz gets 3 more gateways and immediately expands, and he gets a Robo to follow up with Colossus. It's really similar to what we saw last game. Here's the play that especially gets me wiggly. Hyun just goes double upgrades on melee. In a moment, we're actually going to see there we go, the Carapace. No matter how many Phoenixes get made, they're always going to be quite bad against Zerglings. And then Hyun just goes straight into Spire, straight into a 4th base. None of these things can be lifted, brah. There's the extra drone. Moving right on out. Thoink, taking an extra base. And as much as I love this play from Zerg, just this gorgeous double melee upgrade, it's going to provide strength for those Zerglings that we're flooding, that we've got all over the map. It's going to provide strength for a transition into... it's going to provide strength for a transition into Brood Lords. Thank you. Brood Lords and Ultralisks later on. It's good to get this stuff started. This is great. Love it. And right now there's a very funky thing that Oz is responding with. That I think, if I had to point to one thing that I think is the problem, it's these 2 Stargates. This is the most common answer, 3 Stargates, when Zerg is clearly going to go for mass air. But the reason I'm not as big a fan of this is because of daily number 699, where we saw on this map Zest show that with just 2 Stargates, he can begin to build up a Stalker army. He can save some of these extra funds, building lots of cannons at the back, getting Archons. And with these 3 Stargates is slowly revealed the reason why many Zergs answer a Phoenix opening by going mass air. First of all, there's not a lot of ground presence. Can Oz do an attack right now? Or have done an attack earlier to thwart this fast Spire play? No. Not at all. Now that the Spire is done, what is a Hyun to do? Typically, you flood Corruptors right now. Oh, there we go. Looks like a single Mutalisk is going to make a cameo appearance. But typically, we just flood with lots and lots of Corruptors. This will obviously push back the Phoenixes. This will obviously push back Colossus, thereby further delaying these timings. Oz does another move that I personally love, going for double Forge. He's going to be able to get up a lot of the ground upgrades, but I think there's just a little bit too much gas being spent with Void Ray and Phoenix and upgrades. And Colossus range. And more upgrades. It's a veritable upgrade soup. Yeah, so once these Corruptors are spotted, Oz's general approach is, I'm going to get so many Void Rays that these Corruptors are going to melt. And then you, Zerg, will want to steer away from air. And Hyun says, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to get another Spire so I can just out-upgrade you. And then this is the prime classic example in StarCraft 2 right now of going for mobility to win inefficiently. Which just sounds weird, but if you have the fast army, you can expand more. And if you expand more, you are allowed to waste more units, because your income rate is so much higher than your opponent's. So if you then just hurl Corruptor Phoenix against Void Ray, excuse me, Corruptor Mutalisk against Void Ray Phoenix, that's okay. Because we're just going to out-overwhelm them. So Hyun does the smart things. He continues to apply pressure at the most vulnerable location. This is why many players, such as Zest, will build like 50 cannons back here. And then Oz is put in these just ridiculously hard micro situations. Kite forever! There's no fleet beacon. These are not your range upgraded Phoenixes. They still have range 5. Which which means the Corruptors still outrange them. So this is really, like, impossibly difficult. Hyun can just park back. And in the units lost, we see a little bit more lost for Hyun. But that's okay, because look. He's got 5 bases up. He's got all the defenses he needs up. He can take more bases. He's starting to get a stockpile of cash. He's starting to get a stockpile of larva. There's the range upgrade. I'm not as big a fan for what Oz is doing, or what Hyun's doing, but I don't hate it. He's starting to do a transition out, starting to get all the other essentials going, starting to go for Hive. This made me happy to see him just continue to flood Corruptors, because, I mean, he is seeing how frickin' many Phoenixes and Void Rays there are. Corruptors aren't the greatest, but soon enough Hyun's just going to have such a sickening number of Corruptors, it just doesn't matter. And this is, I think this battle represents the core issue I have with over-dedicating to air as Protoss. There is no way you're ever going to be able to reduce the Zerg's expansion count early on. Really just no way, especially not on this map. So this means that Hyun is going to be losing so ridiculously much more. He's going to have a more inefficient army, but that doesn't even matter. We see here 6 Void Rays, 18 Phoenixes. This can't be the whole army. There has to be some Colossus initially to have held off a Hydralisk attack. There has to be some Colossus now because there's threats on the ground that can shoot up. Even Queens, but maybe Hydralisks as well. And then we see Mass Corruptor continue to be massed in a very massive way. And, okay, everything's dead now. Here's the increasingly high-tech upgrades. Soon enough, the Zerglings can even get their own upgrades. And Mutals just keep getting built again. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And now, like, all of everything is in really bad shape for Oz. He has not that many gateways. He has 7. His upgrades for ground are, I think they're doing more or less fine. But he doesn't have any cannons at the back. He has a lot of cannons at this third, which is good. This cannon count is starting to dwindle. And we see Hyun just hitting the same spot again and again and again and again and again. And this move from Oz is very desperate. This is very much so saying, I did the wrong compositional choice early, so I'm just going to hope that I hit you in a rough spot. And this is exactly what a Mutilinging player want. A pretty typical looking game as Hyun cleans up. Very, very easy game for Hyun. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Units lost tab. Look at Hyun. This is what you get if you are a more mobile force. You are allowed to be inefficient and to lose lots of stuff because you just have so much more. I wish there was like a total resources collected in this game. I guess we can look at that by looking at the army tab and the units lost tab. Yeah, I should move on. This game's pretty straightforward. The next game's a weird one. And I think that I will go into probably like a two-parter on this one. I'll do a little bit in this segment, a little bit in the next segment, because I think that, let me just look. Yeah, games 5 and 6 are the shorter ones. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Alright, cool. So this is where it's Oz's turn to be a little bit nutsoid. So we're already noticing, as the probe's coming up, he's going to go for a very normal looking scout. Pull around here, going to continue to loop everywhere that there be creep. And we see a very early forge. one of the reasons why you might justify doing this kind of play as a Protoss player is that a third base is relatively easy to defend here. Natural expansion is always going to be a little tricky. I think, especially in this current map pool, it's always at least a little bit tricky. But you can fall behind and not have a very big army as Oz. And then go ahead and take a third, making up for this loss of stuffs early. This is a very cool, very, very cool play. This is where the game just goes a little nutty. Pretty cool. So, what now? I like what we see out of Hyun, except for this Overlord that almost dies to the cannon. In any of these sort of weird, funky cannon rushy moments, the most important thing is vision of the high ground. If you don't have vision of the high ground, pesky queens like this can just ruin your day. I think it makes sense for Oz to want to kill this off, as this justifies his investment a lot more. And he does it. This is a rather gross spot for Hyun. What is a Hyun to do? The first thing that I love out of Hyun is he's just getting extra queens up. Which... how do I explain that? For one, it is a tool that can provide Hyun in the now a means to get out without spending larva. We're low on hatcheries, we're low on larva. We could, like, build some spines and try to walk them down, but we have spent larva. It's 1 larva per spine crawler to get those up. It allows us to continue to have our larva pumping into drones, the resource that we are naturally low on in this position. What I especially, though, love about it is that Oz is unlikely to be really high on unit count. It's going to be pretty hard for him to do like a follow-up 7-gate push or something like that. But there are sneaky moves that Oz can do as a follow-up, and Queen Creep Spread is a very effective tool to do all that spotting. I love this rise in early queens. Would love maybe to see another queen after he goes for this double expand. But great with these queens up early. Boom, double expand. Now, what's a Hyun to do in this position? Or excuse me, what's an Oz to do in this position? I think I keep calling both of them the wrong name in this. Whatever. What's an Oz to do? I think the first and foremost thing is to get the damn upgrades started. You know Zerg is going to be behind on gas. You know that you can get your upgrades going. You know you're not going to move out to attack much for the time being. So getting an upgrade is a great start. I personally would love to see Oz get pretty quick gases here. And then maybe throw down 3 or 4 gateways and a Twilight Council. And then just expand. In all Sentry, Twilight Council expand. I think that's going to be a very strong move. Hyun has lost probably 20 or 30 larvae from the mist injects. This is a play out of Oz that I really don't like at all. I really don't like this a lot. He's gonna cannon rush this. I really... If he builds the cannons and then goes sentry +1 instantly, I like that a little more. But I mean, to sacrifice the +1 for a really long time, I think there's like 2 opposing things going on right now. And Hyun, I think, is again doing a very smart move and just re-expanding. So when I saw this Mothership Core and this +1, I was like, alright, so now he's going to get a few more gateways. And he's just going to go take a third base, which makes a ton of sense. Right? Should. Oh, look, there's a Twilight Council. He's going to get +2, and he's just going to go take a third. Why does it make sense? We're likely going to be up against slow roaches, probably not even speedlings. And we can easily get that wall off going. But instead we see Oz just trying to shove in for a big... Where's the other gateway? Ah, there it is. Yeah. Just trying to shove in for a 7 gate. And I don't really know how I feel about that. I'm not entirely sure. The reason I'm not entirely sure is that you know that Zerg player can't attack me. You know he can't. He doesn't have any larvae. If he did, that would be very, very suicidal of him, because he would be doing it with almost no drones. Is this hard to scout? Well, probably not. We can just send Phoenixes in. We even have this open as a way to do counter-aggression should he try to attack us. We can move forward and get a count of his gas. We can see whether this is rippling or not. There's a lot of scouting opportunities. So I feel like in Oz's shoes, just marching out and taking an expand and then getting blink is going to be perfect against a Zerg who's going to have the hardest time trying to get up a 4th base. Now, this isn't just an awful move by any means. Oz is saying, well, if you're low on larvae and you're not attacking me, you're probably trying to replenish drones. So I'm just going to go kill you with a nice timing. And we see Hyun going for a pretty typical mixture of just units and roaches and trying to pump out as much stuff as possible, trying to cut this off. Hyun's done a really beautiful job staying alive in this spot. This unit's loss doesn't really convey the lack of larvae that we saw out of Hyun. But during this time, you'll note up in this top side, Oz is not building any probes. What was once an economic lead because Hyun was having to spend everything trying to catch up in drones is now just sorting to equilibrate. Oz continues to try to shove through here. But again, Hyun with a really just sort of non-sexy composition. I mean, it's just lings and roaches. And a +1 upgrade. And some queens being built in trios. Hyun, I think, at this point in time, effectively equalized the game. The fact that those drones had to come off, I think, is the only thing that allowed Oz to really not just outright lose in this spot. I'm not 100% convinced. Hyun pulled drones a lot in this match. And just does the most amazing things with these queens. Oh, yeah. So this game started off as like, oh yeah, Oz is probably going to be in good shape, but then Oz continued to do moves like this, which is like a weird move that you would never really see that much, but this again puts Hyun behind in larva, and I think these moves are really sexy and really cool, but I think it can be accomplished without, or it could have been accomplished even after having taken that 3rd Nexus. This is, I think, a good stopping point for a part 2. Also, please appreciate the sexy blink animation. Whoa! Where it just, like, warps down the unit. Oh, it's so good. But yeah, so I think that, like, you hear me talk a lot about consistency in a game where, let's say, if you go for a very early upgrade, you should either do a timing attack that uses it, or you should very quickly get the follow-up upgrade. That's like consistently. You don't want to get a very fast +1 upgrade and then sit around and not use your forge. And then down the road be like, +2 seems good. That sort of consistency will help you. It'll help. I'm trying to think of the sexiest way to say it. It'll obviously help. Obviously help. It's a way to make sure you are doing the most amount of stuff with the fewest amount of things. And when I watch Oz in this game, I think that where some of these trip-ups happened is in those micro moments where you're like, oh, I can cannon rush, and ooh, we might not have that many units, let me go all in. There's little inconsistencies that allow Hyun to equalize. I think that if Oz did this cannon rush, and then did something that let him get a third up, Hyun would be almost certainly behind. Because Hyun can't both catch up in economy and army and tech. He has to fall behind in one of those ways once Oz is ahead. One of the best ways to extend a lead is just to expand. So when we come back, we're going to see how Oz continues to battle in this relatively even game, number 4.